All right, guys, we just want to welcome back to the Everything College Football podcast. Today, me and Nick will be doing our Week 9 college football Thursday, Friday night game predictions. A nice 5-game slate going down before we get, a big Saturday going. Starting with an interesting game in the Sun Belt. Georgia Southern is now a favorite to win the conference, but they're underdogs as they travel to Norfolk to take on Old Dominion. Georgia Southern's defense, that is, show they can play good football when they beat James Madison. That's a game I went ahead and took a stab at the Eagles to upset JMU as 10-point dogs, and they're able to take care of business in pretty emphatic fashion. The defense, though, was tremendous. They were able to generate a lot of sacks, held them to 253 yards. That's, of course, a week after they were down 20 points in the fourth quarter. The Marshall ended up winning that one. So the Eagles are playing with some house money, it seems like, here. Marquise Watson Trent at linebacker. He's an elite player for them. He was a big leader in all categories. They're playing fundamentally sound defense. Now they're going to face an offense that's not all that impressive, 23 points per game. Colton Joseph at quarterback, though, the last few games is kind of giving them a different spark, with his legs and his dual threat nature. They have a handful of different guys they give it to. No real standouts. I'd say running back Aaron Young, the transfer from Rutgers, as the leading rusher, is probably one of the other top talents. But other than that, they have a handful of guys they dish it out to, but no one that's exactly a game changer for ODU. So the offense is certainly a less than stellar unit, but the run game has been really good for them. They've put up 200 plus yards in a couple of different games now. What is it? I think 4 straight. They have 180 plus rushing. So this is a team that is very good at running the football. Make that 5 in a row now in terms of 180 plus rushing. 122nd sacks allowed, though, for the ODU O-line, Nick. They're not that great up front. GSU had 6 sacks last week. They were sending all kinds of different looks. On the other side, the Old Dominion defense. They're sound. They've not been perfect by any means, but this is a tough unit to play. Some very productive players in the front 7. I don't think GSU's run game will overwhelm them, led by Jalen White, but I certainly think they'll be complimentary. They're really good against JMU with 190 of their own yards last week. So this is an offense that likes to move fast. They like to dish the ball out a lot, and this is a secondary that's been allowing a lot of big plays going up against J.C. French and a pretty talented receiving core. So I think they're going to have a balanced approach, even though ODU has anchored down a little bit the last few weeks. I don't think GSU is going to lose this game, Nick. They're in too good of a position here to potentially claim this conference to lose. Some of those players for ODU, though, Jerron Manning at safety has been tremendous. Mario Thompson at linebacker is phenomenal. Denzel Lowry on the defensive line is a very good player. And then there's the receivers I was alluding to, Derwin Burgess and Dalen Cobb leading the way for GSU. So I think they're going to win this game, even though they're playing a tough, stingy defense, and they've certainly played tougher opponents like Virginia Tech and then South Carolina, Nick. So I think this defense can keep them in the game, but I think the Eagles are the better team overall.
I like the storylines in this game on Thursday night. Georgia Southern, start with them. They've played themselves into the driver's seat in the Sun Belt Conference after knocking off JMU last week at home. They're 3-0 in the conference, 5-2 overall, 3-0 in their division. They're leading that division that Old Dominion's in, right behind them at 2-1, while Louisiana and Louisiana Monroe are both 3-0 on the other side in the Sun Belt. This is a fun conference right now. None of these teams will be playing in the playoff, but I do think these are a really solid group of 5 teams that are starting to, be solid programs. GSU's 2 losses came to Ole Miss, who obviously are really talented, and to Boise State against Ashton Jeanty. But they've been good. They've won 3 in a row. They look really solid. They had that solid comeback against Marshall. It's really good against JMU. I like what the offense can do, and I like what the defense can do. As for Old Dominion, it's a team that started off the year really poorly, even though they did hang in there with South Carolina on the road week 1, but then they had 3 losses to kick off the year before winning 3 out of their last 4, and the only loss was a close loss on the road at Coastal Carolina. They won back-to-back weeks against Georgia State and Texas State, and they're in a solid spot here as well. These are 2 solid Sun Belt teams. I like this Georgia Southern offense, though, right? J.C. French has been really good for this team, 1,500 yards passing, 64% comp rate, 10 touchdowns to 5 picks. Jalen White's been a really good complimentary back, 387 and 7 touchdowns, while O.J. Arnold has not been bad either with 3 touchdowns and 217, 6 yards per carry for him. Bit of more of a red zone, third down back, solid player. The wide receiver room, I think it has some decent players with Burgess and Cobb, as well as Josh Dallas, who's a bit of an underrated player. Tyler Fromm is a good traditional tight end for this offense. The defense for this Georgia Southern team, Marquise Watson Trent is a really good linebacker, leading 69 total tackles. TJ Smith's a good DB, while Chance Gamble has 2 picks and 3 pass breakups, a really solid coverage asset, plus Mark Stampley has 7 pass breakups, 2 picks, and 20 tackles. He's been really good in the secondary as well. I think this offense for Georgia Southern is going to be able to get enough points to get the job done here. I like the balance a lot. This is a really solid unit, in my opinion, that's balanced. When you look at ODU, right, this is an offense that has some question marks for me. Colton Joseph's getting better as season goes on and getting more reps and looking solid, but still, 54% comp rate, 4 touchdowns, 2 picks, 571 overall. Aaron Young has plugged into this offense and looked okay. Colton Joseph is solid on the ground as well with 5 rushing touchdowns, 343, and 6.7 yards per carry. I do like Georgia Southern in this one. I think they're in the driver's seat, like I said, for the Sun Belt. They're heading on the road. They're underdogs right now, which is very interesting. This line at -2 in favor of ODU is quite interesting. But I like the Eagles here. This team's got a lot of momentum. They're in a good spot here. They kind of control their own destiny in the Sun Belt. I like this team to pick up the win, keep up the momentum, and build towards hosting a conference title game down in Statesboro.
Now we move to a game in the ACC between two very good teams that are certainly overachieving at this point in the year. Syracuse and Pitt. The Panthers are undefeated now, up to 6-point favorites. I think when you look at the Syracuse offense, they should cook here. McCord versus the secondary, certainly a favorable matchup. Rondé Gadsden's a very good tight end for them. They're pretty deep at wide receiver. A couple different guys they throw the ball around to. LaQuint Allen at running back's a nice complementary weapon. Guys like Trevor Pena, Jackson Meeks. They have 3 different guys with 430 plus yards. So I love what this receiving group brings to the table. They're facing a Pitt defense that does have a pretty good pass rush, though. And, the Q's tackles have been exposed at times. Over on the left side, Demetrius Witherspoon, and on the right side, Savion Washington. Certainly not playing as good a ball as they're, able to in terms of talent, what they should be playing. Kyle Lewis has 8.5 TFL for Pitt. That's certainly a very strong number. Jimmy Scott, Nate Matlock, other good pass rushers for them. So it's been a pretty solid Pittsburgh pass rush. The secondary, though, they've certainly been, kind of ailing. 250 yards per game allowed almost. They're, it's only about a 60% comp rate. So they're certainly good in terms of allowing, not so much efficiency. But this team didn't look very good against Cal. Their secondary gave up 272 yards. Offense got shut out in the second half. Against Cincinnati, we were back in week 2. That was a game they were down big in and they ended up coming back. So the secondary, I think, is probably going to be in for a bit of some issues in this one. And, for the Orange, they're hopeful to get linebacker Marlo Wax and then corner Marcellus Barnes back in this game. They're certainly battling some injuries on that side of the ball. Got to be able to contain Des Reed here. Eli Holstein, he's certainly capable as well of being a dual threat player. He's having a phenomenal year with, 1,700 yards, 15 passing touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. He had 2 of those against Cal with 133 yards. It was his worst game of the year, so after the bye week, he's certainly looking to bounce back with what is a talented group of pass catchers himself. Keontae Mumpfield, Kenny Johnson, and of course the aforementioned Reed. He's the second leading pass catcher for him. This is a Syracuse defense I think is quite underrated. I know they disappointed against Stanford, and they're certainly going to be faced with similar balance with the Pitt offense, where they gave up 170 plus passing and rushing in a disappointing effort. They turned up against UNLV, though. I know in crunch time they didn't look all that great. They're able to step up when it mattered most, though. Against NC State, they kind of got torched through the air. Most of that was coming in late, though. I think this is an underrated team for Syracuse. Nick's 6-point line doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. I think Fadil Diggs is going to have some big moments. Devin Grant, he's been really stepping up for them due to injuries. Justin Barron, he's also been playing some really good football. And I think Pittsburgh, they're also kind of vulnerable at some of their spots on the offensive line. A few guys on the interior are a bit shaky. And then over at right tackle, Ryan Baer, he's probably going to get exposed against Diggs. So I think Hughes, they're going to come in here and win this game outright. Pitt, they quite frankly, shouldn't be 6-0, Nick. They were down double figures in the second half to West Virginia and Cincinnati. Ended up winning both of those games against North Carolina. It was a bit of a tough effort. Ended up winning that one on the road, though. And all the way back in week 1, their defense was kind of giving up some big plays to Kent State. So I certainly think Pitt may be a bit overrated, but I think it's a very impressive achievement so far, what they've been able to accomplish. I think that Qs are going to get this one done with McCord leading the way.
2 teams in the ACC here that are overachieving expectations that even their own fan bases could have had. I was quite high on Syracuse in the preseason. I thought Kyle McCord was not the problem in Columbus, and I thought he would plug into this offense and be a really successful player, while I thought Fran Brown was a solid hire, despite the fact that he had never been more than, a defensive backs coach at Georgia. I did like the hire a lot. And Pitt, a team that, not a lot of people are high on. This team's at 6-0. Yes, they've gotten pretty lucky across the way. You just rattled off some of their lucky escapes, but they're still 6-0. You still got to respect that. This is a team that is playing high-level football here. I am going to take Pitt, very slightly. I think they're going to win by probably about 10 points. I think it's going to be a very high-scoring affair. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Syracuse wins this game. I do think they are still a really talented team, and a lot of the reasons I think that they can win this game is because Kyle McCord is really solid. 2,100 yards passing, 65% comp rate, 19 touchdowns, 6 picks. The picks does worry me, right? The 6 interceptions is a bit concerning, and I think that's an advantage that Pitt could try and certainly take care of there. LaQuinn Allen's been a solid complimentary back, 450 for him, and 4.8 yards per carry, 4 scores. Really solid numbers. This wide receiver room is a very deep. We worried what would this wide receiver room look like. They've been very deep. Jackson Meeks has been solid for this team, 459 and 4 scores. Treborn Pena has been really good, 5 touchdowns, 458, although he's cooled down a little bit as of late. Rondé Gadsden has plugged back in, coming back from his injury, being really solid at 433 and 3 scores, while LaQuinn Allen is a really good back out of the backfield, a really good receiver with 3 receiving touchdowns as well. When you look at the Pitt offense, Eli Holstein coming, another quarterback transferring from a high-level program, this time Alabama, and Holstein has exceeded all expectations. Nearly 1,700 yards passing, 63% comp rate, 15 touchdowns, 5 picks. Syracuse defense could certainly get a few picks here as well. These are both two good secondary units with quarterbacks that are a little inaccurate at times in terms of interceptions. Desmond Reed, I like what he's been able to do. Holstein's solid in the red zone as a runner as well. Reed has 3 touchdowns and 500 yards rushing, 6.3 yards per carry. Reed's a really good receiver for this team, the second highest receiver for them with 25 grabs for 341 and 4 touchdowns, while Keontae Mumfield is a really solid piece with 463, 17.8 yards per grab, and 3 scores. The defenses, I don't think they'll be a super factor in this game because I expect the offenses to put up an absolute show here, to be honest with you. I think this is going to be a complete shootout in Pittsburgh on Thursday night. I think this is a really solid matchup between offenses that are extremely powerful when you look at them on paper, although I do think some of the defensive pieces for Pitt, including Donovan McMillan, Kyle Lewis, and Brandon George, are the bit of the difference makers. I think this linebacking core for Pitt is a really solid unit, while the Syracuse one is a bit banged up. I like a high-scoring affair here. I like a really entertaining game on Thursday night. This is a really good matchup between overachievers in the ACC. I like Pitt to move to 7-0. Bit of a fluky 7-0, kind of weird when you look at it that way, but they're still going to be 7-0. They're still a really solid team. They got to play some tough teams coming up, so that obviously we'll see how real this team is. Syracuse could certainly win this game. I think they'll be competitive throughout the 60 minutes, but ultimately I think Pitt gets the job done.
Now moving to Friday night's 3-game set, starting in Chestnut Hill, Boston College hosting Louisville, 7.5-point dogs. And I think for Louisville, their run defense and their D-line has just been incredibly disappointing this year. Last 3 games, they really just not showed up really all year long, I would say. They got grinded down on against SMU. Miami had some strong physical runs. This is a very good defensive line that I'm a fan of for Louisville, and they just have not stepped up. Guys like Jared Dawson, Tramel Logan, I think they're phenomenal players. Yashin Gelati's been incredibly quiet as one of the better edges in CFB. It's just been kind of embarrassing. Now they're going up against an offensive line that's very good. They're very physical. They got a 3-headed monster. They can attack you with Shashawn Ward, Turbo Richard, Kyle Robichaud, and then of course Thomas Castellanos is highly explosive. Even though their run game's kind of been in flux over the last month now, more than that. They're really struggling to produce even against low-level opponents. So this is an offensive line I think it's capable. And I think Bill O'Brien's certainly going to have them more in sync in this contest than what it should be. Another disappointing effort for Louisville, but I think this is a game where their defense, they're in for a good performance at some point, and I think against an offense that hasn't shown good consistency, it'll probably happen here in this game. In Boston College, on the other hand, they got absolutely torched against Bryce Schull-Tutton. 368 rushing yards and 5 scores allowed, and there's a lot of explosiveness in this backfield led by Isaac Brown. They have a handful of different guys they're going to get the ball to. Louisville, it's been a good unit for them. They kept serve with Miami. That was a hard-fought game. Tyler Shaw's been a lot better than I thought he would be this year, pushing almost 300 yards a game, 18 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Had a great game against Miami. They have guys that can hurt you in the receiving group as well. Ja'Cory Brooks has been phenomenal. Chris Bell's been great. Colin Lacey starting to get into the thick of things now that he's healthy. He had a big kickoff return in that one. And I just think the Boston College defense, they weren't great last week. The offense shot themselves in the foot numerous times with a couple of fumbles. So it's hard to expect them to play much better in this game, Nick. Boston College hasn't looked good really in weeks. So I'm going to take Louisville to win this game because I think the offense will be efficient enough. And again, I think the defense will at some point play better than they have, and I think it's going to be this week.
I'm on the same page with you here. I think this Boston College offense has been lacking as of late. While this Louisville offense is still a good unit, I know they lost that game to Miami, but they did score 45 points in that one, also scored 27 and lost to SMU. So this team is still scoring a high click. The defense has to show up at some point. I am concerned about that, but I'm looking for some of these pieces to step up. I think MJ Griffin, DJ Quinn, Shaquan Clark have to step up. Ashton Gelati has to certainly step up, but he's not been good enough. 2 sacks this year is not good enough for him. Tramel Logan has 3 sacks, but I want to see more out of him as well. for this defensive line. In terms of this offense for Louisville, Tyler Shaw has been a lot better than a lot of people expected. I thought he'd be solid here. He's a veteran. He has some experience. 2,000 yards passing, 18 touchdowns, 3 picks. Protecting the ball, that was the big key thing for me. Could he protect the ball? Having 3 interceptions so far this season, I think that sort of proves that he is protecting the ball a lot better than previously did, which is really solid. Isaac Brown's been good. 564 yards, 8.3 yards per carry, 4 scores, while their other running back, Duke Watson, has 9 yards per carry and 208 and 2 scores. So they're both very efficient runners here. They don't run the ball a super amount, although Brown does have 68 carries. I like the balance. Ja'Cory Brooks has been phenomenal since transferring over, 679, 18.9 yards per grab and 8 scores, 36 receptions, double the next highest receiver, Chris Bell, who has 330, also 18.3 yards per grab and 2 scores. Very efficient. Mark Redmond, underrated tight end for this team, 139, 12.6, and 3 touchdowns for him. He's a really solid, prototypical physical tight end that works well in this offensive scheme. When you look at Boston College, Thomas Castellanos has been good, but not good enough as a passer at times. 1,100 yards passing. They don't really attempt the ball a whole lot. 126 passing attempts from him. 60% comp rate, 14 touchdowns, 4 picks. Has taken 16 sacks, which is certainly a problem for this offensive line. He's getting roughed up out there quite a fair few bit, and you've seen him get banged up a little bit. He hasn't really run the ball as effectively as he did in the past. Only 2.2 yards per carry, 161 yards rushing, and 1 score for him. The rest of the running back room is a really by-committee approach. Treshaun Ward and Turbo Richard each have 50-plus carries, while Robichuk has 62 carries, and they're all at least 250 yards to 300 yards rushing, about 5 yards per carry for all of them, except Robichuk, who has 4 yards per carry. They split touchdowns in the red zone, so a very split by committee running back room here. Not sure how that's working out for this offense. Lewis Bond's been incredible for this offense, 34 receptions for him, 376, 2 touchdowns. He's the main target. Reed Harris, Jaden Skeety as well have gotten a couple grabs, but this offensive weapons have not really stepped up to what you would hope. Kamari Morales is a solid tight end as well with 3 touchdowns and 170 receiving. I think BC, they're just not going to be able to keep up eventually in this game. I think the defense will get stops for Louisville and get the job done. I like this offense on paper here, and I think the defense will figure it out and organize it. This BC defense is missing some key contributors due to injuries. I think they're going to lose this game. I think it will be close for most of it, but I think Louisville will win by 10 in the end, probably like a 38-28 score. I think is what I put in the PowerPoint. Something similar to that. I think they'll cover that 7-point spread. Yes, they're traveling on the road, but I think this Louisville team is a lot better than people realize because they are 4-3 with some good losses on the resume. I like the Cardinals to go into Boston College, get the job done, and knock off the Eagles here.
Now I moved to a big game in the Mountain West. We had a full breakdown on this one, so we'll kind of keep it short. Boise 3-point favorites heading to Vegas to take on UNLV. Ashton Gianti, of course, the Heisman favorite, running behind a very physical offensive line, going up against a Rebel defense that they've had some struggles against the run, but they've been serviceable. 2 great linebackers leading the way, Jackson Woodard, Manai Powell. They also have a secondary that's been phenomenal at creating turnovers with 13 interceptions this year. Of course, the addition of safety Jalen Catalan, he's got 4. He's been phenomenal for them. And I think their coverage ability is certainly impressive, even though they give up a lot of yards when they're ahead in these games. Boise State, Maddox Madston with the run game they're going to have. He's not put in too many situations to turn the football over. I think that's going to be a big difference maker in this one. While the Boise defense, they've proven to be legit, especially against the run. I think against the pass, though, there's certainly a lot lacking there. And I think Ricky White's probably going to tee off and have a big game. Malik Williams, his playmaking as a dual threat player has been great for this offense. So I certainly think that we're going to see some more points than Boise's accustomed to giving up. 35-30 victory for me, which is going to be a slight cover, and that's going to be right there on the edge of the total, which I think is certainly worth in play. But it's certainly a testy over, considering both of these teams excel at running the ball. Nick, you can see a big chunk of clock disappear in a hurry. But I think this is a game where Boise's defense, they're going to struggle just a little bit more because this is a triple option attack. I know they played Oregon, and they're very good against them early on in the season. But I think that they have the balance and they have the playmakers, that being the Rebels, to keep this one close. And I think they'll rough up Gianti. I think they're going to be playing close to the line of scrimmage. These DBs are going to have big responsibilities, but at the end of the day, he's still going to have his 200 yards, 3 scores, and they're going to win the game.
The key matchup in the group of 5 here, a really big game going down in the Mountain West on Friday night. I think Boise will win this game barely. I have them, winning by 5 points again, barely covering that spread. I like what they have on offense with Gianti. Obviously, what you're going to get out of him. I think the big key for me is I like this pass rush for Boise State to win the matchup in the trenches, get in there, rough up Malik Williams. I think that they can win that battle if they stuff the run. Yes, UNLV has some success passing, but they really just target Ricky White a bunch, and Malik Williams hasn't been forced to throw the ball. They've only thrown the ball when it was beneficial beneficial to them. If they're playing from behind and Boise State is controlling the tempo, controlling the line of scrimmage, I think they're going to win that matchup very easily. This is a big game, though. You want to watch this game if you're a college football fan. A huge, important matchup in the Group of Five playoff race. Really, two talented teams going down there in Vegas. I'm taking the Broncos here. I think Janty will get enough to get the job done. He'll get to his yards per game quota and get the job done and continue to build his Heisman race. If they win this game, I think he's the Heisman frontrunner. If they lose it, might make that a little bit more murky of a situation because I do think that the voters will be a little weary of voting a guy if the team is not playing competitive games late in the year in terms of a playoff race. This is a great matchup, though. Certainly tune in if you're a college football fan.
Now moving to the nightcap, a late one here. Right after Game 1 of the World Series, Rutgers traveling out to LA to take on the Trojans. And as an SC fan, Nick, this team should quite frankly be undefeated. You can call it bias or whatnot, but I watch the games every week, and so are the ones that might not. I'll inform you. The fourth down defense has been absolutely poor for SC in the fourth quarter of games. On the final drive for the 4 losses they had by the opponent, they all converted fourth down conversions, where if there would just be, 2 or 3 more third down or fourth down conversions better, they would be undefeated right now, Nick. It's been the exact same story every single week. Incredibly frustrating for a very improved football team that has proven they can play in this conference. They were up 14 points in the fourth against Maryland, lost. They were up against Penn State, should have won that game. They went to overtime against Minnesota, 4th and goal at the goal line. They end up scoring barely on maybe a questionable call, but they put themselves in that position. And then against Michigan, they had them pretty much beat, and then they gave up a 70-yard run off a missed tackle. Also, they ended up scoring on 4th and goal at the 1-yard line. This team can clearly play, Nick, but there's just been some demons they're fighting in these fourth quarters, and this has got to be heartbreaking for a defense where confidence has got to be kind of shot right now. Top 2 players on defense for USC are out. Eric Gentry and Anthony Lucas certainly doesn't help. Guys like Braylon Shelby, though, have had to step up. Devin Tompkins, Gavin Meyer's been great. Some of the players in the secondary have been very impressive. And for Rutgers, this is a team that started off the year 4-0. They've lost 3 in a row at Nebraska. That was a game we kind of anticipated them losing. It was a hard-fought effort. But the last 2 have been embarrassing. They've been battling a lot of injuries on defense. 550 yards in a blowout loss allowed to Wisconsin. Ethan Garber's put on a clinic. This past Saturday, they almost gave up 500 yards. And again, I think the injuries have certainly plagued them, and I think they'll continue to do so. We won't see an injury report until the game actually starts. That's just how college works. But it's been tough for Rutgers, Nick, and they showed some nice effort against UCLA to hang in there. I think Cal Commandus played a really good game. Kyle Mongai was, he's having a great year, 845 and 10 rushing. 14-point line here. It's really hard to get a read because USC, they just can't keep their foot on the gas. And Miller Moss, he's having a good year, but he certainly hasn't, stepped up in these key moments and delivered for USC. An interception now in 5 straight games, bringing his total up to 6. This is a team that's been running the ball very well. The offensive line started very shaky. Woody Markstow has been an unsung hero for this team. A lot of youth at wide receiver, and Jacoby Lane and Kyron Hudson are leading the way, going up against a tough secondary. I think the injuries to, a lot of their edge rushers, net guys up front for Rutgers are certainly going to allow them to probably get torched a good bit on the ground, and SC will have that balance. But I just don't know what to say about USC. Speechless. 3 weeks in a row, it's the exact same conversation. It's mind-blowing.
This is a fascinating game going down at 11 o'clock. First, I want to give kudos to the Fox people. This game being at 11 o'clock on a Friday night is no coincidence. They did this. They picked this back in March when they were picking time slots. They wanted this game at 11 o'clock so that a potential World Series between LA and New York could run right into the broadcast, keep those viewers, and keep that viewership high. And, well, they got their dream wish as we have the World Series going down the same night, both in LA, leading into this game. I mean, wow, what a crazy, fortunate draw. I know when you have the 2 best teams in baseball in the preseason, maybe it's not that lucky, but with how things shaked out months later, they look like geniuses. They're going to get a lot of viewership that rolls over and at least will stick around for most of the first quarter, I'd have to imagine, even though this does kick off very late on the East Coast at 11 p.m. These are 2 teams that are in a tough spot right now. USC, they've lost 3 of their last 4 in tough positions against Maryland, Penn State, Minnesota, and Michigan. Tough losses, while Rutgers started off 4-0 and looked really good, and things have started to unravel in Piscataway with injuries as they fall 3 straight games in a row, looking lifeless in that Wisconsin game, especially. Certainly difficult. I think that Rutgers will cover this 14-point spread. I don't feel super confident about it, but I think this game will be closer than a lot of people expect. I think this defense is still really good for Rutgers, even though they have a lot of injuries. They're really good on third down. They're efficient. They have good tacklers. They have a solid secondary as well. The D line is very physical. The injuries, I know, are an issue. When you look at the Rutgers offense, Kaliakmakis has been a lot better than you could have imagined. 1,300 yards passing, 53% comp rate, 8 touchdowns, 5 picks. I think that's really good for Rutgers quarterback, and he wasn't very good at Minnesota. So you plugged him in here, and he's having a decent enough season. Kyle Monaghan, he's the real story down there in Piscataway. 845, 5.5 yards per carry, 10 scores for him. He's really good. The wide receiver room's a by committee approach, nothing that really jumps off the screen. When you look at USC, Miller Moss has nearly 2,000 yards passing, 14 touchdowns, 6 picks, but has been a little disappointing as he's not been super clutch other than that LSU game. It hasn't really bailed this team out in situations, although the defense should really do their part as well. They let up some big plays, especially the Michigan game is the one I'm thinking of that helped them cost that game for them. Woody Marks has been a good back. Finally, USC has a rushing attack. Marks has been really good, 661, 5.6, and 5 scores, while Quentin Joyner has been really solid as well with 3 scores and 9.1 yards per carry on limited carries. I like the wide receiver room's got a bunch of different guys. Jacoby Lane's been really good. Zachariah Branch has been solid, although no touchdowns. Deuce Robinson has 4 touchdowns. He's been a really solid red zone target. Kyron Hudson's been really good for this team as well. USC will win this game. They'll get the job done at home, certainly, but it's going to be a lot closer than they would like it to be. I think Rutgers will put up a serious fight and keep this one close Friday night. These are two teams that are in a kind of a tough spot, in my opinion, right? Both would be at 4-4 if this result goes in favor of the Trojans. Disappointing for USC, certainly a team that I thought could potentially make the playoffs, a team I was very high on. And Rutgers, obviously right now for Greg Schiano's team, just getting to a bowl is kind of the goal. Can you find your way to a bowl game? With the schedule that's left, I mean, they should be able to, even at 4-4 right now. It definitely isn't super easy. They dodge a lot of the tougher teams. They got to travel to Maryland, got to play Minnesota and Illinois as well. So certainly the pathway is a little difficult for Rutgers here. A win would put them in a really good position for bowl eligibility. I do think the Trojans get the job done, though, late night, Friday night on the East Coast.
And what do you make about USC, Nick? A team that beat a top 10 LSU team, should have beat third-ranked Penn State. Record's not vindictive of how good they've actually been, but 50 minutes of ball is not going to cut it. You got to play a full 60, and they just have not done that since entering conference play, and it's certainly just led to a lot of negative morale, a lot of negativity towards Lincoln Riley. And this team clearly is vastly improved. They can compete in this conference, and the opportunity for a big blowout win here against Rutgers can certainly lead to some positivity. So you're picking a closer game, which I certainly think, great to get back on the board, but I think Trojan faithful are going to be expecting a blowout in this one.
I think you can certainly overlook the Penn State and Michigan loss. Traveling to the big house is not very easy, even if Michigan aren't a very good team this year. And Penn State is, the number 3 team in the country for a reason. They're a really good team. And you took them to overtime. You went toe to toe with them. You were leading in that game. So I think there's not a whole lot that you can be super disappointed. But when you look at the Maryland and Minnesota losses, right, those are gut wrenching losses. Particularly the one in Maryland this past weekend was a brutal loss on the road, in my opinion, a game that they should easily be winning. I don't think Maryland's a very good team. Lincoln Riley, he's trying to figure this out. Obviously, there will be some, growing pains with kind of a transition period in terms of the defensive scheme, as well as sort of changing up the offensive playbook a little bit, running the ball a little more. I thought this team would be better. I think this team showed that potential in the win in Las Vegas. They showed that potential in the win over Wisconsin as well, that this team can be really good. They just cannot seem to finish the job. They seem to get in their own way, shoot themselves in the foot, and cause problems. I don't think there's any reason to sort of think about firing Lincoln Riley right now. I think this is a team that will figure it out in due time. Probably, next year, the year after, we'll be contending for a playoff spot. Disappointing, certainly for a USC fan perspective. I think this is a team that does have the right pieces. You got to just put the puzzle together.
For today's episode, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.